Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory is a Kingdom Hearts themed rhythm game that came out a little while ago, and I didn't play it, so really I don't have any authority to speak on its actual design and game feel and all that kind of stuff. From looking at the footage of it, it seems to have done a remarkable job of translating the kind of texture of an action game to, the mechanical focuses of a rhythm game by, making everything into this, you're running along a track and whacking things in time with it. The sound effects are actually supporting the music and the rhythm of it instead of completely overtaking the score like happens in the Persona rhythm games and some other bad rhythms games out there. But I didn't play it. And I'm not here to offer a review of Melody of Memory itself. I am here to discuss the game on a completely different metric, and the only one that matters: how well each of this game's stages would translate to a Walt Disney World ride. You see, the way the game works is the characters are running along this track through essentially remixed maps from previous games in the series, where they've taken elements of the map design from previous games and kind of rearranged them into a continuous level, because obviously in earlier games, sections were separated by load zones. They weren't continuous. Right there, you just saw we kind of made this transition from what was the 3rd district of Traverstown in Kingdom Hearts 1 into the 1st district of Traverstown from Kingdom Hearts 1. So one thing this game has had to do in order to facilitate its style of presentation is they've had to take all these maps from throughout the series and string them together into this continuous sequence. A lot of this stuff was really interesting to me when I was watching gameplay of this, because it reminded me a lot of the types of transitions you see on so-called dark rides at theme parks, be they at Disney World or Universal or wherever else. The types of rides that aren't roller coasters, they're more about taking you through kind of a narrative and through an environment, right? And you have a lot of tricks being done to give a sense of scale and perspective and to shift the audience through different scenes and different rooms and environments throughout the ride, right? There are especially parts of this that kind of even feel specifically like cues from Disney rides, for example, like the Peter Pan dark ride has a bit where you kind of push through the window out of the Darling's house and out into the city and fly away, and the perspective and scale kind of shifts around you as you move past things. They become smaller and smaller to make it look like you're, flying away. And there's a lot of moments like this where they've taken, what were originally completely separate spaces of the level and linked them up with these big kind of doors that you're passing through. And it made me think about, some of these levels wouldn't even require much modification to turn into fairly solid Disney World attractions. So today we will be going through the levels of Melody of Memory and reviewing them based on how well they would translate to a theme park ride. Note that we will not be including levels where there isn't actually a level, where it's just, you're running against, a video, an FMV or whatever. We also won't be including boss levels. We are only looking at levels where we are actually going through a 3D space that has been rendered using assets from the previous games. Also, because I don't have my own footage of this game, we will be using Everglow's footage. If you're not familiar with Everglow, he runs a fantastic YouTube channel with tons of Kingdom Hearts content and footage and playthroughs and neatly edited experiments that he does with different games. Like he did like a chronological edit of the entirety of Birth by Sleep, cross-cutting between all 3 of the campaigns and stuff like that. I've used his footage for a number of projects in the past, including when I've talked about the cell phone games and that type of stuff. Absolutely fantastic and invaluable YouTube channel and resource. If you're a Kingdom Hearts fan, check him out. I haven't scripted anything having to do with this. While I do know what I'm going to say about a lot of these stages, I have looked at all of these previously. It's been a little while since I've watched all of them, so I am going to try and give, numerical rankings. Take those with a grain of salt, though, because I may, give something a low ranking, and then way down the line, we see something way worse, and maybe it throws off the curve a little bit, but whatever. Anyway, starting out right here with the dive into Heart, not an impressive showing for a Walt Disney World ride. It would be an interesting, individual room, perhaps having this, really large, dark environment with these, big kind of glowing landmarks or whatever. I could see this as an interesting section of a ride. Fact of the matter is that one of the big parts of designing these types of rides and making them entertaining is that you have to control sightlines and information and, have an experience that unfolds as you're on the ride, and you just see and discover new things as it goes on. Fact of the matter is, on this ride, you just turn your head. Oh, look, I can see the whole rest of the ride. It's all, I can look whatever direction I want, and I can see all of the stained glass windows all around me. So, it's not a very interesting ride. You got the whole thing within 5 seconds of getting into the vehicle. So this one, low score right out the gate. Impressive tech if this was in a ride, and maybe one interesting room, but not very good. I'm gonna hit this with like a 3 out of 10, maybe? Let's move on. Number 2 here is a little bit better, Destiny Islands. The track is kind of interesting, the way it kind of weaves over the kind of the outcropping here, gives us interesting angles on things, and I like where we kind of pass over the fort section here, going between kind of the 2 big struts. I like kind of pushing through this, wrapping around the back of it to see the to see the back half of the island. That's neat. That's a fun little transition. However, it does remain that once you make that transition on each half of the stage, you can basically the entire thing is laid out in front of you, right? You can see the entire front beach, you can see the entire back cove at all at one easy glance, so there's really not much to this ride. It does have the nighttime shakeup, though. Obviously, it's only an aesthetic shakeup, and unfortunately, the nighttime version of the stage suffers from essentially the same issues as the daytime. Couple of neat transitions, but once you see the given half of the map that you're on, you kind of have the whole lay of the land in front of you. Not super duper interesting. However, if there was a version of the ride that blended these two together, you take one lap around the island during the day, it transitions to nighttime, and then fed seamlessly into the destroyed section. If all 3 of these sections were combined into a singular ride, I think that would be a little bit interesting, but each of them on their own, there's not a lot going on. I'm going to say the hypothetical ride combining the daytime, nighttime, and destroyed versions of Destiny Islands into one attraction is like 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5, maybe. It's all right, I guess. The actual Destiny Island level, though, I'm only going to give a 4 or a 3. I'll say 4. This, though, just looping around the destroyed island, this is lame. This isn't even as good as the Dive into Heart stuff. I'm going to slap this with I mean, there's nothing to see. There's not even any interesting landmarks to look at. This might, we might already have a 1 out of 10 really early, boys. The Traverstown Stage, we obviously saw this one a little bit earlier when I was discussing the premise of this video. I like this one well enough. For one, it's a very good showcase of the actual locale from the original Kingdom Hearts. It includes pretty much everything that you would want it to. They even include the back alley section that's kind of behind the hotel, which you wouldn't necessarily think that they would include that. You think they would just do the 3, districts and call it a day. The transitions are pretty clean. They feel natural enough. There's not really a lot of sense of, like, excitement to it, or pushing you through the space. However, they control sightlines very well, part of just the consequence of it being, this urban environment in the first place, and they make most of the transitions around curves. Like here, we had to kind of cut over to the right to move on to the next area, and again, we'll have to cut right when we get to the end of the back alley up here. Just by doing this, it means that you're constantly seeing new stuff. The ride is changing up. You're going through different things. This one would be okay as a ride. We'll give this a. I mean, you know what? Freaking, it's better than, Small World or whatever, right? So, that's an automatic 5 out of 5. All right, the Wonderland map. Notable right up front for actually having active elements. Watch the bed in the back there. When we get up here and we take the shrinking potion, whoop, zoops back in there. Events happening up in front of you that change up the map as you're going through it. A lot like what would happen on a Disney ride. Something happens, a little voiceover from one of the characters, some kind of door opens up just as the ride vehicle gets to it or something like that. Very cute. They didn't need to put that little touch in there. The transitions, however, on this one are not so clean, like this push in from the forest area into the Hatter's Tea Party. Does not look so great. And that looks even rougher. The walls just kind of being sliced open, and here pushing straight on into the Queen's Court. The way that these transitions are just so rough that it takes you out of it, where you can't even focus on the Queen's area so much because you're immediately like, oh look, the hallway is right up there, and it's just cut into the back wall. So this one, it gets major bonus points for the bed collapsing back into the wall. Other than that, though. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give this one like a 4 out of 10. All right, here we go, the Agrabah level. This is where things get a little bit spicy, and the level actually really leverages the aesthetic variety of the original world. First of all, right here, whew, fantastic, pushing into the cave, those close walls next to us, and then opening up into this much larger space. Really great sense of kind of excitement, pulling you through the stage there, revealing a space up in front of you, and again, pushing us through kind of smaller walls here into a smaller room, another small door, then up into a big open space, and then down into the hole towards the lava. Right now, this is really good stuff. This hardly would even need to be changed up to make it an actual literal Aladdin ride like at the parks. We push through this wonderful vast open space that isn't even actually like a section you got to walk through in the original game, but it's part of the carpet escape sequence, right? They took some really fun liberties here. Again, nice tight walls here, kind of closed in, so you feel like you've got this stuff pushing past you as you're moving through the space. You get a better sense of the speed when things are right up close to you and they, disappear faster and open up into a space beyond. Push forward into this dark transition cave, which the game will use a number of times to cheat and jump between locations that don't really match, but here it works pretty decently. And then whoop on into actual Agrabah itself. Again, pushing through slightly tighter corridors here. It doesn't work as well here as it did in the cave because unfortunately with the structure of how Agrabah is laid out in Kingdom Hearts 1, there's no curves. You can basically see the entire map as we're pushing through it. There's details to see off to the left and right, of course. We're almost going a little bit too fast to be able to appreciate those details, though, because this map is so large, we have to get through it so quickly, which is the only really unfortunate thing about the usage of Agrabah. Now, the run that I picked here did start at the cave. If there was a version of this that started with Agrabah, and then, or sorry, rather, the version of this that starts in Agrabah, right? And that's maybe that's the queue, right? Like, you get on in a replica of Agrabah, and then only the first couple of seconds of it are pulling through a few more streets, then on into Cave of Wonders, deposits you back in Agrabah, right? That would be the way you would structure this one if it was an actual ride, and the actual Cave of Wonders section of the ride, immaculate. There is honestly so little to ask for on this map. I mean, they've already gone out of their way and implemented stuff that the transitions on this are so much richer with, we've actually got, the inside of the mouth here kind of modeled in, right? We come into this room from above. It's just, I don't know, this one really phenomenal. It would require very few changes to actually be an effective, entertaining ride that you would just get on and enjoy. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead. This dip, this down into the mouth, and then this 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. This is good stuff. Halloweentown, conversely, is one of the first levels we encounter that feels unfinished. It feels like something slapped together in Roblox or Gmod or something. There's a lot of art assets from the original world just kind of floating around you. You can see there's kind of aspects of the original map down below us, but they're so far down below. And we're looking at them from so much higher up that we feel completely detached from them. We have this, the entire, lay of the land laid out in front of us. There's no transitions. There's no pushing us through stuff. It's just this big open space as we loop around kind of with the, with the rest of the map on the outside there. Oogie Boogie's Manor over here on the right. There are a few fun transitions on this map. For example, we have kind of this knocked over section of it here that we push inside, and then it kind of, this obviously isn't really a logical, literal progression because now this room is so much bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. And I do like that because playing with perspective to get transitions from, really large sections that are actually miniatures into an interior that they don't have, room to build the entire thing. That kind of stuff is cute. So I like that pushing through that central column there. And again, having actual active elements down underneath you is not something that a lot of the stages in this game do. So I like having the, the roulette wheel kind of pop up and activate and spin around. That's fun. But the beginning of the level, and now we're coming back out here. Look at this. What is this? This visual mess. This is nothing. Forget even, there's no storytelling happening here. This doesn't feel like anything. It's just a big open area with a skybox down below us and weird, what is all this going on over to the right? There's just floating platforms and stuff. I don't like this at all. I respect the perspective shift when we push inside Oogie Boogie's Manor, but that is honestly, I think, the only thing that I like about this stage. I'm gonna hit this boy with a, man. I don't want to be too mean because I do like that part, but the rest of it is so ugly. I think I'm going to hit this with a 2 out of 10. Atlantica's a decent improvement over the level we just saw a second ago, and obviously the designers had a bit of an advantage with this one because the original maps in Kingdom Hearts 1 were so much larger than the other maps in that game because of the swimming aspect of it, right? But I love this transition here from the kind of outer area into King Triton's throne room where they have the columns lined up right next to the track, and you kind of go along those. Opens up into the throne room for a second, got the throne off to the side there, you can get a good look at it, then push on into, push through that, into Ariel's grotto. The way that it's cut into the the side of the throne room here is a little bit awkward, but it's not a completely clean cut like they often do. It's kind of jagged. It's not like it doesn't look like man-made, it looks like a natural hole. And the other good aspect is there's so much visually going on with the throne room, and the riders are probably distracted looking around at it, at the, presumably at the animatronic of King Triton that would exist in the room, and other aspects that would be at play here, that the transition might not even be that noticeable, because it happens pretty quick once you turn around, and as soon as you're through it, boom, you're into Ariel's grotto, which you couldn't really get a good look at until you're right up on top of it. So this transition works pretty well overall. I like we're again pushing into a tighter space here, kind of the smaller valley. Overall, this one isn't super remarkable, but part of that is also owed to a weakness of the original Kingdom Hearts 1 Atlantica map, which is that it doesn't have a ton of really memorable landmarks. I like the transition into the throne room, and I like the transition into Ariel's grotto, and I like that they've got, you know, some tighter spaces that we kind of get to push through, including the big kind of shell thing here in the courtyard. But there's not really a ton memorable or interesting or exciting about this one. Again, largely just because of the nature of the original map. It's well enough. It's done well enough, though. Nothing offensive about this one. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. The Colosseum, unfortunately, will not earn quite so much praise from me. I do like the way that they've contorted some of the space to make it much larger, because obviously the original map for the Colosseum, very boxy, very closed in, not a lot of room for what they're doing here, and at least the weird floating assets don't look completely out of place here. Those kind of lanterns, torches, whatever, floating alongside the track look okay. Unfortunately, I think they're supposed to be like getting narrower, or I don't know, I can't really tell. The perspective is off on them. They don't look symmetrical. They don't look like they line up, but I mean, at least I understand what they're going for there, unlike with the Halloweentown map. And again, I appreciate the way that they've kind of stretched this map out, made it feel a lot larger. However, while you're at it, right, why not make this hallway a little bit tighter? I don't know, you got that big grand entrance, and then you push into here. I don't know. And this room is just, there's nothing to see in here, right? They could have at least put the trophies on the walls or something, but that little transition room to the actual arena, there's just absolutely nothing to see. From a story standpoint of transitioning to you from the entrance to the arena, I guess it has value, and I like the theming they're doing here with they're blowing up the pots instead of enemies for a second here, but this one overall, just not feeling it. And then again, because they have so little to work with, you're just pushed back into this room again. Now with the trophies sitting around. I guess, oh, you went off and did the fight, right? But then you just get spat back out into the arena, and this time there's not boxes there. So I guess now we're fighting monsters, but we already got the trophies. So what's and now the pots we see them floating in the distance, which spoils where the track is gonna go, and they look awkward from a distance. And when we push up over this, we're just out in the middle of nowhere skybox, and then back around to the beginning of it again. Even the nighttime variant of Olympus Colosseum does this stage no favors. I mean, I can't, unlike with the Destiny Islands one, where I can at least imagine it being used as a transition to Destroyed Islands or whatever, this really just doesn't lend anything to the stage. I mean, I appreciate that they bothered to throw in the differently colored torches, but that's really it. I get nothing. I get absolutely nothing from either version of this stage. This would be the most boringest ride. I'm gonna give this like a 3 out of 10. I'm having a hard time keeping track of what I'm giving each stage, honestly. 3 out of 10, whatever. Number scores don't matter anyway. Let's just move on. On to Monstro. This stage is interesting, if only from an aesthetic standpoint. I think this ride would be really cool to be on from a visual standpoint. You got some blacklight stuff going on when you pass through here, maybe. Some, a little bit of neon. You got all kinds of different interesting visual effects going on here. This reminds me of, I haven't been there since they opened it, so I shouldn't say reminds me. It looks like what I imagine a lot of the stuff that they talked about doing with Avatar Land at Animal Kingdom. A lot of like the fake bioluminescent stuff. This would be, at least, if nothing else, visually interesting to pass through, I think. I like this section. You got, the stuff kind of climbing the walls, bubbling up around you. Unfortunately, this stage does not make very good use of the actual space. Part of the problem, of course, with the original map is that it was very claustrophobic, a lot of small rooms that would be hard to make work in the format of Melody of Memory in the first place. Overall, this just doesn't do too much for me. It's just this really gradual, big, this lazy turn all the time, and you go through another thing, and I know you're saying, isn't that every map in this game, Jacob? No. Aside from the raw visual presentation quality, this one just doesn't do much. Doesn't really have interesting storytelling. I mean, even right there, we go from the location of the final boss, essentially, of that sequence, right? We're in the stomach with the stomach acid down there. This is the big, epic, cool final climax of the thing. And then we're just on to another normal room, like the one we saw at the beginning of the ride, back around into the mouth where the boat and all the wreckage and stuff is. There's not very good storytelling going on in this one. Partially the consequence of the original map design, but I don't care. We're just ranking these levels on how they would work as Disney rides. Interesting visuals. Maybe we could snatch this and put it into it. Snatch this right here, put it into another ride, right? Snatch this room right here and put it into something else. As it stands, though, pretty boring. Some cool visuals. That's about all it has going for it. If I'm feeling generous, I'll give it a 4.5. Oh, Captain Hook's pirate ship. I was kind of dreading this one when I saw the format that they'd chosen. How much can you really do with it here, And there's not a lot of detail. There's not a lot of interesting landmarks, right? It's just a bunch of rooms over and over again. I like it in the game design of the original Kingdom Hearts. Doesn't work so well as an interesting environment to ride through. I mean, perhaps a version of this, decked out with animatronics and storytelling elements happening. But then again, we have the direct comparison of the already existing, Peter Pan's flight rides, which take you through the whole narrative of the movie and through different sections of Neverland and stuff. Being stuck inside Captain Hook's ship the entire time is pretty lame, if you ask me. This could work as like as a walkthrough attraction, maybe. I'm thinking stuff like, like the walkthrough Swiss Family Robinson house or whatever that's in Adventureland. Stuff like that. Like, I could imagine a fun walk through the interior of Captain Hook's pirate ship ride at a Disney setting. But, beyond that, this really isn't doing it for me. Even the little sojourn we take to the outside here to see Big Ben, it doesn't have any connective tissue. This is what I was talking about, where even though there are maps that use these voids to warp you between spaces that don't connect logically, there are some levels that use it well and some that don't. I like it when it happens on Agrabah because most of it takes place in the Cave of Wonders, and it feels like this, it feels like it is the whole ride. It feels really exciting on its own. And Agrabah just feels like feels like either the intro or the outro, right? This has no connection to the ship whatsoever. It doesn't feel like you've, emerged victorious from the ship and returned to Agrabah, or you've departed from Big Ben and headed into the ship, from the cave and returned to Agrabah. There's no sense of storytelling or cohesion to this. It's just because, we'll put Big Ben in there to mix it up, right? And they didn't even, I would have preferred to have just kind of weaving back and forth in harsh curves and loop-de-loops around the exterior of Captain Hook's pirate ship. That would have been more interesting. As a walkthrough ride, as a walkthrough attraction, rather, this could be interesting. As a ride, this is so painfully dull. I'm giving this we're not staring at huge technical issues, but there's just nothing to see here, guys. I'm slapping this with a 2.5 out of 10. Ah, my beloved Hollow Bastion, surely you won't let me down. This one has the advantage of obviously taking place in a absolutely gorgeous level from the original game, and we don't have a point of comparison of like, hey, there's an existing Disney ride or something else to compare it to, like we do with the Peter Pan one a second ago. This is just its original thing, and we get to see, okay, what would a ride set at Hollow Bastion feel like if Disney actually cared about this property and it was a way bigger deal. I can't say that I really super dislike this trip we're taking kind of, off the edge of the castle and into open air, but anytime that we are just out in space and there's nothing much around us and there's just stuff off in the distance, it's not as interesting to me. I want a sense of speed and movement. Like here, we're pulling into this through those walls, and there's really interesting stuff down there, and we blow right past it, and we don't really get to spend any time there. They took the climax of the game and one of the most visually interesting settings, and they shrunk it down in scale instead of blowing it up, and we just breeze past it to fly outside of the castle and look at nothing. Oh no. Did they ruin it? It is deeply unfortunate that the only real part of the Hollow Bastion level that is neat is the initial entrance here, coming in from the outside, going through this and into the library, and then through that onto the actual proper entryway and kind of the elevator chamber beyond there. But the library has been made completely barren. There's not like stuff sitting around. You think they would have rearranged bookshelves maybe to give this more of a sense of claustrophobia and to make it feel like there's stuff around, put some stuff, on the sides of the tracks maybe. They could have rearranged it instead of just pushing everything out except for the stuff that's up against the walls, And then we push on into here, and there's just not much to see. And granted, it goes by fast enough that it doesn't really bother you. And I do like, I'll always think that the lift sections of Hollow Bastion are really beautiful. Kind of the weird laser grids and the stained glass up above. But it's just this one section, and even that is not very good. It could have been executed better. This one is a real letdown. This would be a boring-ass ride. It's not awful, but I'm gonna hit it with a 2 out of 10. Next level up here, unfortunately, suffers from the fact that the original level, right up front, was just this big, open, empty space, which obviously we've been talking about. That's not really great for these types of attractions. And what's really disappointing is that they took the actual, kind of, void that you pass through, right? And you blow past it and go towards their newly instated black void. Couldn't they have just, for this one map, made the black void purple and smoky, and when you push through it, you could still have the normal inky black void on the inside, make the transition just kind of a fade or whatever. At minimum, I can't be mad at this fade too much, because that's what happens in the original game too. You just kind of teleport, but come on, you had the normal portal right next to it, and then we just go past it. All that being said, this is a spot where the teleportation effect actually really works for Melody of Memory. Often it doesn't, but the sudden snap reveal of this room, going from black to all these Technicolor lights out in the distance and these crystals shining back at you, and there's enough crap on the walls, right, that even though the whole room is laid out in front of you, your view is pretty obscured the whole way through, and you've got these bright colors whipping past you, your perspective is changing a little bit as you go on, let down by pushing into a blank, empty tunnel, another empty, black, inky void that lets out into another tunnel, and then just another big, open room where you can see the whole thing laid out in front of you. We don't even get an up-close look at any of the interesting landmarks. We just cruise past everything. Followed, of course, by another inky black void transition into the room that I'm not going to talk about, into the kind of remnants of Sleeping Beauty and Snow White and Cinderella's worlds. There's not much going for this level other than the reveal into the Crystal Chamber. For that alone, I will give this a point boost to a 4. I don't even know if that's fair. Let's say a 3.5 out of 10. As I said previously, we're not going to be talking about the boss battles because this has no bearing on our criteria. All right, here's some food for thought. In this game, Melody of Memory, each level is a bunch of rooms from other levels smashed together to make this kind of abstract amalgamation of connecting everything together. And in this level, they are using assets that were originally abstractly connected, semi-random rooms smashed together to create an abstract sense of connection. If you know me, you know that I'm a fan of the aesthetic of Castle Oblivion. I can't really decide if I like or dislike the fact that they've made transitions between rooms a white void, and then a fade into the actual space. On one hand, I like that they created a unique transition for this world. They didn't just recycle the black void. It makes sense with the way that rooms and spaces are connected in Castle Oblivion to have the transition be this white, empty, blank void, and then the next room materializes into it, right? I think that that's thematically appropriate, and I also think, perhaps more importantly, that's a really, really cool effect to be able to do for an amusement ride. I don't know if they would do it via like some kind of trick where it's not where the room is like actually being colored by projection mapping or something. Like I'm thinking something similar to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, the ride that opened a week before Walt Disney World shut down, but that I've watched videos of because I'm a nerd, where they have a lot of rooms that completely change appearance based on projection mapping shining lights onto things, right? Where you have a room that appears to be red initially, and there's a lot of elements against all the walls, but then the lighting effects completely change around, and things that were once machines become trees, things that were an interior background become an exterior background. I wonder if there would be a way, technologically speaking, to have a ride vehicle enter into a room that is a completely pure white blank space and then have it take on definition. You can't just blast a ton of light onto it because that's not how that works. You have to find some way to like negate every single shadow in the room, or you would have to have all of the actual detail work not be part of the set, but something that is created by light projections. I'm not sure if it could be done, but I think that would be a really unique experience, right? Going from the normal ride experience, which is, you hide what's in a room by lowering the lights, by hiding things, by having the room be pitch black or close to pitch black, and then having lights to come up to reveal what you're actually standing in. I think the reverse, where you move into a room that is lit but lacks definition, would be really neat. And I bet that someone at Walt Disney World could figure out, if someone at the Imagineering team could figure out how to do that. That being said, it is very unfortunate that there is really not much of interest to see on this particular ride. Part of the difficulty with the aesthetic of Castle Oblivion is that there's not a lot of landmarks, and they've hurt themselves even further by restricting themselves just to the generic rooms of the PS2 game, with the exceptions of the room where you fight Marluxia and this, the stairwell sequence. It's just, They almost could have taken the stairwell thing, like they've bent this where it was previously straight. I almost wish they'd made this straight. They made this just a rail, a straight, narrow line, and had the walls really closed in, made the room much smaller, right? And have you up the stairs, through the door, into a large room, right? But by having this be the same huge scale as every other room, there's just not really anything to see. There's no sense of progression. There's no storytelling. The thought experiment of wouldn't it be neat if, that I was talking about a second ago, bumps this by several points. So as a proof of concept that somebody walked into a meeting with of, hey, I'd like to do a ride that does this, and they're like, okay, that's cool, but do you have a theme and something for the ride to be built around yet? No, unfortunately. Okay, well, we'll shelve this one, but cool idea that you had there. I'm gonna give this one an honorary 5 out of 5. All right, here we go, boys. My greatest disappointment. The Twilight Town stage is awful. You remember what we saw previously with the Halloweentown world that just had a bunch of crap floating in the air? They've decided, what if the entire map was crap floating in the air? They've taken all of the buildings and they're just floating up over a murky brown, like, ground texture. We're not traveling along the streets of the city. And what is this? There's just this huge earthquake has happened, and a section of the city has been completely lifted up. How many people died in this catastrophe? The featureless, low-detail walls of the environment of Kingdom Hearts 2 and of this city really stand out here, where they're up against, like, what looks like not even textured almost, like this down here below space. And it just, this is such a murky, bland feeling to this entire map. It literally feels unfinished, at least with the whatchamacallit, the Halloweentown map. At least I wouldn't say that it was like, it felt almost like a stylistic choice. This feels like they didn't finish the level. It's just a bunch of random stuff just floating. What is this? What are these buildings doing? Floating over here, trying desperately to give some sense of shape and definition to this map. There's a big entryway down there that we could have gone through, but it's just floating off to the side of the map instead. We cruise past the station, cruise past the garage. We're floating up in the air instead of actually being down on street level, pushing between the buildings, feeling like we are in Twilight Town. This is a travesty. We only have fleeting moments of intimacy. Oh, look, it's Roxas, Hayner, Pence, and Olette's little hangout, and it's gone. We just push through it just like that. We're back out into floating buildings and no road. There's no sense of place to this. It's so awful, you guys. I love Twilight Town. They ruined it. How did they take it from me? How did they butcher it in such a horrible way? Just about the only thing this level has going for it is the transition through the wall breach into the forest. I mean, at least they did that. I shouldn't even give them credit because it should be the most obvious thing in the world to have the transition from the city through the crack, to have a big, you push through that and then whoop, big reveal on the forest. Except they didn't even do the forest because they spent so much time in their abstract garbage jigsaw floating city that there wasn't room left to do the forest, to have you weave through the trees and emerge out into that environment. We have to skip straight to the mansion, skip straight to the entryway to the mansion. I'm not going to complain that the interior of the mansion doesn't exist. I don't see any workable way that they could have done that within Melody of Memories restrictions, but like, You push through this, the library here, kind of, into the computer lab, but look, you have the entire lay of the land of what you're going to see in the mansion. From the front gate, you can see it, guys. You can see the library, the computer lab, and Naminé's memory pod room right there, and you gotta wait like 10 seconds to get to all of it. You're pushing into an interior environment, and there's no reveal. There's no sense of drama. It's just all laid out right there in front of you in the most boring way possible. Oh, look, a hallway we could travel down and experience, we could push past things and then on into the... No, the hallway's going away, and now we're just in a big open room, and then we're gonna go into another white void, and it's gonna dump us back out into the skybox over Jigsaw City. This is the biggest disappointment in the entire game. We could have had a cute, fun, dark ride experience, taking us through, letting us to live in Twilight Town. And instead it's this abstract, unfinished, garbo, ugly mess. 1 out of 10. This level is just a repeat of the very first level that we saw today, except, of course, the few landmarks that are here are now all adorned with the exact same art. So there is absolutely nothing to discover and nothing to see, even less than there was last time when you could just turn your head and look around and take in the entire attraction in one fell swoop. 1 out of 10 again. Any Neverland-themed level in this game is at an automatic disadvantage since we can make comparisons to the actual versions of this ride that exist in parks. However, one thing that this has going for it is obviously that it is in broad daylight instead of at night, inside of dark spaces, which is, of course, where the term dark ride comes from. Maybe if this was turned into some kind of, like, alternative VR experience, right? Or like if it was if Soarin' got temporarily replaced with a Peter Pan version where you flew over the islands and the sea breeze splashed up into your face and you whipped over recognizable scenes from the movie or whatever. That could be kind of an interesting concept. However, unfortunately, as much as I do like Days, some people have problems with it. I like Days, and I like what they did with Neverland and Days. I think it worked. I think it was a nice mix-up for that game. Doesn't work so well here, because unfortunately there are very, very few landmarks of great interest. I like that despite its massive scale, it doesn't skimp on the storytelling aspects. It doesn't just, just passively fly over stuff. It does kind of whip us around in ways to take us closer to the landmarks. We're getting closer to Skull Rock here. We were flying low over the cluster of islands earlier. This level does stuff. It doesn't cop out just by being a massively zoomed out open space. However, it's still not super interesting. It's better than stuff we've seen in a similar caliber, similar styles of levels earlier in this. Still not a super duper good ride though. Also would be nearly impossible to execute. Even if it could be executed, again, suffers from the problem of, okay, I have the whole ride now. 3 out of 10. This level does fare a little bit better than Twilight Town. There's still a lot of moments where we are very pulled out from the city and zoomed out, but at least here, look, it feels like we're kind of going through the streets. I should at least be happy that the buildings are on the ground. One thing that is a bit unfortunate about the way that this game tends to pull so far out from the actual terrain and the levels is that sometimes it can mess up big reveals or theming. Here, though, I do really like the way that you're coming up against these skyscrapers. Again, this is an advantage of controlling sight lines, right? These skyscrapers are right in on you here, and then there are the screens on Memory's skyscraper, right? I wish we kind of could have been on ground level and come up to it and maybe gone up the building, but then again, with the way that this game is laid out, you can't control the camera. You want to be at the appropriate height to have the reveal of the monitors work here, with the corner of the building coming around, the screens, and then the neon coming into view. This transition is pretty nice. They didn't have to use one of the more obvious, like, big square window map transitions. They just used the layout of the skyscrapers in a fairly naturalistic way to bring us through the level. I really appreciate that. I like that they're taking us up really high, like we see in the cutscene, but we aren't allowed to do in gameplay. Even in the video game where we can run up any wall in the game, they decided to put an invisible wall on the one wall we would want to run up. And again, I appreciate, especially compared to Twilight Town, that there is at least an attempt to make this look naturalistic. It all flows together much, much, much better than that level. However, unfortunately, the actual streets of the world that never was are relatively lacking on interesting landmarks. I really like the reveal of the tower, like I said a second ago, and I like that it's, better than what we saw a second ago. Still not that great. I'm gonna give this a 5? Maybe that's unfair. Especially considering, it did the best that it could with the material, but it's not just about doing the best that it can with the material, it's about how well it would translate to a ride. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of interesting stuff to see on this one. I'm gonna give this a 5 out of 10. If I wanted to be mean, I would say the Mysterious Tower loses a few points automatically just by featuring theme of annoyance. But we are grading this based on theme park ride-ness. So presumably the audio featured in the game might not even be the audio featured in the ride. So we're just going to try and judge this based on its merits as a level. One natural advantage to the Mysterious Tower is that it is, this big curving spiraling structure, right? So we do have, kind of a second ago, you saw we went around the staircase, there was a wall blocking us, and then up the stairs. Let's assume this version doesn't have the magical transitions, right? Of going from the lower room up the stairs and then letting out into, presumably created by optical illusion, a much larger room, another staircase. The transitions here through the little, the rooms where you did the combat and stuff, almost feel unnecessary. I would rather just move on to the next mystical staircase, you know what I mean? But at least there's some work being done here. The magical transitions work here fairly well. The color palette's a little bit awkward, but whatever, it's fine. I wish instead of coming out at level with the door, we had gone up the staircase and then into the door. I do like, however, the door is really, really narrow here. Look how tight the door is. If we had instead of having the magical transition, it had let straight into, imagine, if you will, version of this that is coming up the stairs, so we can't really see into the room that's beyond that door. So we don't need the magical loading door. It just has Yen Sid's room behind it, right? We come up the stairs and then tilt in. We got this really tight doorway, and then we're just in Yen Sid's room. Unfortunately, since we're using the Piss Light magic transition, what should be a really nice, gratifying sense of progression and movement and reveal of going through that gate and then into, there's the room opening up in front of us, is lost, because instead, now we feel like we're out in the open and then the room just pops in around us. So, you lose a lot for that melody of memory. It could work, obviously in a ride, you wouldn't have the magical transition, but presumably, let's just assume a magical transition in a ride translates to, the expected, to almost pitch blackness transitioning between main rooms, right? I like the initial transition from this room kind of around the corner up the stairs. Other than that, there's not much about this one that's doing it for me. It's not, bad. This one isn't offensive. And it does at least have interesting landmarks and transition, there's a sense of progression to it. You're climbing up the tower. I'm gonna say 4 out of 5. You're probably getting the sense by now, considering how few levels even score above a 5, that most of these don't transition terribly well to rides. This one does, though. This one has a lot of the hallmarks of one of the more low-key dark rides. It's just about kind of, seeing the various environments, right? This one doesn't have a sense of excitement and drama to it so much like the Cave of Wonders sequence does. However, it does take us through pretty much all the key locations from the movie, at least the ones that are featured in the game, right? I'm always going to have a bit of a problem with these magical transitions, and I wish that we had scaled the mountain as opposed to warping immediately to the burnt-out village. But I still appreciate, it's hard to screw this one up with the elements that were available for the Mulan map, because at least in terms of environmental variety and progression and telling the story, the Mulan level in Kingdom Hearts 2 was already doing a pretty good job. Going straight down, and again, I wish we could kind of ascend up the stairs, but with this one, we can't see what's inside the building, because you'll notice through that gate, there is an immediate harsh right turn. So even though we can see the door for forever, there's still a sense of drama of we know we're going to go through that door, but we don't know what's on the other side. And even once we're inside, there's still a little bit more of that transition because we got to go around this corner, past all of this pageantry, and into the actual throne room. I think I would skip the bamboo forest where Mulan and Mushu meet right here, start us right in the camp, so we can immediately, so we can free up that space and have the scaling the mountain. We would make the bamboo forest the queue area. This is the line. This is where you get on the ride, right? The actual ride, though, dumps you immediately into the whatchamacallit, military camp, and then we just have an extra sequence of scaling the mountain, right? Now, you list this thing with some animatronics thrown in, some audio accompaniment, right? Like you have during the, you have a little bit of I'll Make a Man Out of You play in here. You have some animatronics goofing around, then you have a mountain climbing sequence, and that's where A Girl Worth Fighting For plays. Then A Girl Worth Fighting, cut off, and the ride vehicle turns a corner into the burned out village, right? And it's very dramatic. And then there's intense music, you get some pyrotechnics popping off for the battle in the mountains. Then you go down into the Imperial City, and the animatronics defeat Shan Yu, right? This is almost how I would imagine if there had been a Mulan ride made back in the day. This is about how I would imagine it being laid out. Doesn't have the drama and excitement, like I said, of the Cave of Wonders, but this had transitioned to Dark Ride really with no problem. So I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. I will not be so merciful to Beast's Castle, unfortunately. I wish that I could be, because Beast's Castle is a great setting for this type of thing. I believe they actually just opened a ride like this a few years ago at Tokyo Disneyland, I believe. But as you will see right away, ruined. Ruined immediately. I want to explore Beast's Castle. I want to go through this setting. I want to feel immersed in the castle and explore each section of it. Ruined almost immediately by awkward, really ham-fisted transitions. Okay, cool, wow, sweet. We went through the front doors and into the main entryway to Beast's Castle, and what is that? What is that crap? The grand stairwell and the door, ruined. There's a massive hole in the wall leading straight into another hall with a weird abstract staircase coming up from behind. This looks like an Escher painting. This doesn't look like Beast's Castle. Normally, I'm complaining that spaces in these levels aren't small and claustrophobic enough, but I think I almost would have made an exception to make this room much larger in order to allow the track to curve up along one of those staircases and dump us into the hallway. Instead of this ugliness, you have messed up the entire thing right up front. The only part that you need to get right, other than the ballroom, you completely blew. I mean, all this other stuff is just extraneous. It's nice to see more of the castle, but you've got those centerpieces, those major moments, and you just blew it. This transition obviously is natural. This one feels fine, but you messed up the lobby, guys. Come on. Beast's bedroom actually feels appropriately small. You whiz past the rows there. That feels nice. And this hole being punched here into the ballroom, it works. It feels okay, I guess. Going up and going around the chandelier was a nice choice, I guess. And then going out the back door into a big kind of panorama outside of the castle is actually not that bad, even though I know with my movie watcher brain that's not the way that window is facing. It works perfectly well. We get this huge, nice aerial shot of the forest outside and the castle exterior. Normally, obviously, I complain about this type of stuff, but there's enough detail here. The space is fully realized enough. It's not just a bunch of abstract floating game assets that this feels okay. I wouldn't mind, cruising outside and looking at a miniature of the castle for a second, then pushing back into the rest of the ride or whatever, right? However, again, the lobby, dude, they blew it. They blew the lobby. It looks so bad. It loses so many points just for that. This one mostly is okay, but I'm gonna have to give it a 6 out of 10. Maybe 5.5. Somewhere in that range. Alrighty, Olympus Colosseum takes a shot at redemption, ironically, in hell. This one lends itself to a level quite a bit more than the layout from Kingdom Hearts 1, obviously, because, there's actually a lot of level here. The lack of landmarks when we're going through some of these tunnels does hurt it a bit, but adding in the extra effects of the rocks falling down and breaking apart and stuff like that, but it's just not a lot of interesting stuff to see along the way of this one until you get to, again, that cavernous reveal, right, of going through this small space. They've really tightened up the walls here on us, right, and then they push past and revealed this massive, epic room that we're inside. Once again, I would kind of prefer that we started lower, ascending up, instead of starting at the top, just because the sense of progression would be a lot better, but regardless, they did it well. Then we push into Hades' little room there. That's cute, and it lets us back out into the, kind of the entrance area. From the perspective of a dark ride, obviously would be a little bit better if this one, if we had dumped back out into Olympus Colosseum or something. Obviously, the top layer is there in Kingdom Hearts 2, so maybe they could have done one of those dark, evil portal transitions, and boom, you're back outside in the bright sunlight at the very end, right? You escaped from the underworld. That would be kind of cool. Or maybe we are to presume that the Olympus Colosseum facade, the Thebes facade, would be the queue, and then this is the actual ride. So maybe I shouldn't expect that, right? It doesn't add a lot of... I wish there was a bit more of that sense of drama to the actual ride, though. Again, that's what's so neat about the frickin' Agrabah one. Regardless, this one doesn't do anything special, but it's very competently executed. So unlike Beauty and the Beast world we just saw a second ago, which had some cool moments undermined by some glaring flaws, this one is going to get a 6 just on, like, general competence, but not being amazing. First disappointment, right out of the gate. They should have made the characters and the map and the enemy. You should have made everything black and white while you were here. They didn't even need to make new models for the other teams. They just needed to make them grayscale. They didn't do that. But unfortunately, it's too late for that, and it has no bearing on our discussion of Disney ride aptitude. But most of these rooms just aren't super duper interesting. You know, you've got this bit's kind of fun. You're pushing down underneath this this overhanging. What is this? This isn't a bridge. Is it like a sluice gate or something? It's a gate of some kind. Nah. There's some fun transitions here and there in this level. We get to cruise past Steamboat Willie here for a second, but this just isn't how I would design a retro throwback, you know, ride, right? In my head, it would be on, you would be on Steamboat Willie, right? You'd be surrounded by animatronics maybe, or you would be in another boat putting along Steamboat Willie, occasionally bumping into it along the way, kind of similar to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, where you're in your own ride vehicle, but Minnie and Mickey keep kind of showing up throughout it in different things and interacting with you in different ways. This just doesn't, there's just not really a sense of progression to this one. And that's, again, because the original level was so disconnected, just warping you between different spaces. There's really nothing special to this one. No sense of pace or place. I'm gonna give this one, I guess I'll throw him 1 bonus point for it'd be cool to have a black and white ride. I guess that means I'm going to say this is a 3 or a 4. I'm going to say it's a 3.5. Christmas Town fares much better than its Halloween counterpart, because it actually makes use of stuff. Look, they got the train putting along over there. Was that even in the original game? Did they take a train asset that was sitting somewhere that was seen off in the distance in that initial map when you walk in, and they blew it up and put it right next to you? Because it looks pretty low detail. It looks like something that would have been like way off in the distance on the initial entrance map or something. But they put it right there in front of you. They got another one off to the side over there. That's the type of stuff you would see on these types of rides, dude. Because of the way the map is curved, we don't really get to see inside Santa's workshop until we're pretty close to it. A little bit too late for my taste. I almost wish we'd had that harsh turn like we did going into the Imperial City, but whatever. It's not a huge complaint, you know, and this is just the beginning, of course. Just seeing the interior, you know, his little living room, that's just the beginning, because then we get dumped out into the toy factory. Unfortunately, a lot of this level's transitions just do reveal themselves way too early. Look, we can already see where we're gonna go in a second. We could already see this room well before we entered it, and we could see the room after it well before we entered it, and we're in this room for a pretty long time. Again, a lot better off than the previous attempt at this level. Those are really the only floating assets right there, and they actually look good. They don't look weirdly placed or you know, unsymmetrical. Those actually look like they're in the right spot. Those actually look nice, those candy canes kind of hanging out over there. And cruising over this town in the distance, and the giant tree sitting in a frozen lake off to the left, that stuff actually looks really nice. I like that. There's some nice theming work going on here. You know, kind of the transition into Santa's workshop is okay. Not very exciting, unfortunately. You say, Jacob, how could they have done that with a level that exists in Kingdom Hearts 2? They couldn't, but I'm grading this based on what will be better rides. This gets a perfectly competent, though unexciting 5 out of 5. Alrighty, and here comes a level that I was dreading, precisely because of its openness, the Savannah. Obviously, huge open spaces like the centerpiece of this map don't lend themselves well to the type of stuff we're talking about today. This game does a decent job of avoiding that initially, starting us out in the kind of the beginning spawn section, pushing us through the elephant graveyard as a very tight, narrow valley. This stuff works pretty well. This looks kind of like what you would expect to see on a dark ride. Feels fairly claustrophobic. You got a nice curve there, kind of revealing more of it. You know, you don't see the whole thing laid out in front of you. This beginning of it is actually pretty promising, more promising than I was expecting, because I really did not expect this one to go so well. And then, very wisely, instead of just having us like loop around the massive Savannah map pointlessly and look at nothing, they use it as a relatively brief transition, pushing us towards Pride Rock. And this one, I'm actually okay with seeing something, you know, kind of far away and leading up to it, because Pride Rock is this big, grand, massive structure that you're, moving towards in the distance, right? And having it off there in the distance and really big and you kind of come towards it, that feels fine. That was probably the best usage they could have had. Unfortunately, after that, my early praises of, wow, they handled this pretty well, doesn't work so well after this, because now we're in this big, open, boring valley space, and they did an admirable job with the jungle transition here. It works well enough, I suppose. It looks fairly it looks shockingly naturalistic, but I don't know. It's just not lighting my world on fire. But, I could say, a version of this, a bunch of animatronics show up or whatever. There's Hakuna Matata playing going through here. There's little jungle creatures jumping out all over the place. That part could be fun, I guess. This part is borderline useless. You pull up on kind of like the cliffside here with the waterfall. You don't spend any time. Look, you barely even get to see it. You get a reveal. You actually get an accidental reveal. Not because of closed-in walls, but because there's so many trees and junk in the way that you can't see it. Oh, what's that? Some kind of waterfall, some kind of cool place. Oh, sweet, I can see it. No, come back. I wanted to, blew it. Why didn't we cruise along that? We could have put this just a little bit further along. We could have hung out there and flown off the cliff up here where this tree is. Get rid of this tree and put the mouth of the cave right here, right? Come on, no-brainer. Let's spend a little bit of time here. This is, the kind of the resting point of the journey if we're tracking, Elephant Graveyard over to Pride Rock, Stampede in the Canyon, and then into the jungle on Hakuna Matata, musical number playing. I don't know. This one, for being shockingly competent considering the maps that they were given, I guess I'll give this one a 5 out of 10 as like a good on you, whoever was the map director for this section of the game. Though honestly, it probably deserves a 4. There's nothing really wrong with it, but it is nothing remarkable about it either, other than, wow, I can't believe they did that well with the Kingdom Hearts 2 map that they were given to work with. Okay, gamers, I hope you're ready to enter the Masterpiece Zone. The narrative flow of this is almost exactly what I would imagine if they had done a Tron ride back in the day. So we start out locked up in the prison block, right, waiting to be forced to participate in the games. We have a little transition room here. We will probably have, an animatronic or voiceover telling us we're about to be forced to participate in the games. A lot of the window transitions in this level work better than they do in other spots because of the theming of Tron, because you can have these interesting colors at least going on when you have these sharp cutouts in the level that look like they fit. Then we get dumped into, boom, the game grid, the light cycle sequence. Let's assume, obviously, this would be a little bit more involved in the actual ride, right? Dare I say, it would take on the qualities of a Universal ride, even more so than a Disney ride. Some cool special effects firing off, maybe some flame effects to make us feel the heat when a light cycle blows up next to us or whatever. Then the wall explodes and we push through it. Again, I didn't need to do this, but they have the wall here. It looks like a big, solid purple crack that matches the weirdo color scheme of the Tron world. You only realize it's because it is one solid color and smooth texture on the inside that is bent. It's curving around, and then you push into it, and now we're on to the next section. We're escaping. We got to figure out how to get out of here and defeat the MCP. We push through the most visually striking room of the ride yet, with all kinds of lights and stuff going off, right? Big computer monitors flashing information, probably saying prisoners have escaped or whatever, right? Push through another kind of gap in the map that is, again, immaculate theming going on here. This ain't one of your generic map transitions that we have on some of these so far. They've actually got the lights animated on the walls here. There's strobing going on, there's lights streaking along with you, and then this is when I knew they were really on some next level stuff with this map. Look right here. This is the area immediately outside of the I.O. Tower from Kingdom Hearts 2, right? This is a big open empty room. This is a big open empty room that we have here. But what are these walls? These are the walls that the hostile program boss puts up. These walls are only present for one boss fight, but they've put them here so they can double up on the cavernous room reveal. We don't really get to see the full scale of the room, right? We have the walls here, we're pushing forward, and we barely get a glimpse of the full scale of the room until we get another push through these blank outer walls that are just a solid color and into a room of strobing lights on all of the walls and stuff. absolutely fantastic, immaculate. Outward, we push through another hallway here, another quick transition section. Window off to the side, we can look off and see the Solar Sailor docking bay into the I.O. Tower. We get some voiceover from Bruce Boxleitner. Bruce Boxleitner says thank you to the Bruce Boxleitner voiceover. If you haven't seen Tron, you're probably very confused about what I'm talking about. The only really awkward map transition in the entire level is right here. This is a bit unfortunate, but then look at this. This is incredible. This is even better than what was in Kingdom Hearts 2. We have the entire mess of data outside of the central mesa here. There are very few points in this game where they've actually bothered to go and throw in set dressing and, like, you know, and elements of the game that aren't always present or interactive things. They have the Solar Sailor here parked outside. You cruise over it as if you've, you know, ridden it into this place. And then you come over and there is the central control mesa right there in front of you, right? My only real complaint with this map, the only thing that could be done differently, is I wish that it went inside, that it did a loop around where the MCP's big thing is, right? Where the big red towering entity of the MCP is. The only real issue, of course, is I will acknowledge that within Melody of Memory, that is essentially impossible. There's no way that they could have have us do a loop around that and turn the camera, because we're always looking forward, right? We can only do it if it was a boss stage against the MCP or whatever, the way the boss stages are oriented in this. So we couldn't have done that. Unfortunately, with the way the Melody of Memory is structured. We can see the MCP flashing inside of there, though, which they didn't have to do. They could have had it to be an empty map, but we can see the light of the MCP as it's going boom, 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 boom on the inside of this thing. And then it transitions us back around to the cell block, though we can assume that in an actual ride, it would dump us back out into the queue, which would, of course, be the real world. The queue would be styled like NCOM or whatever, right? Dude, so good. So this in particular, this impressed me, that they bothered to have this big jagged mess that barely even exists in the actual game. They threw in the Solar Sailor, they have us fly over it, and for once, them messing with the scale on things really does feel right, the way that we push over it in between the two different sails. Like I said, if we went inside the MCP's central mesa, right, this would be a 10 out of 10. But I acknowledge that the game cannot do that. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, the contrast between this level and the Twilight Town level, the contrast of use, the creativity of the assets on display, the storytelling, the way that it pushes us through the environment, the contrast in quality between this level and that level is one of the main reasons why I decided to make this video. Because when I watched this, I was like, oh my god, this has the flow of if there had been a Tron ride made back when the movie came out, it would have been like this. There is a gut instinct within me, especially when I look at rooms like this and I see how well the aesthetic of the Tron PS2 maps work for this type of thing. There's an instinct within me to give this a 9 out of 10, and I know that that's wrong, and it's not even because I'm a Tron fan, it's because this was kind of the first one that I saw that made me go, this would be an interesting idea for a video. When I originally watched this one, I had not actually watched the Agrabah Stage, and I know that this is not as good as the Agrabah Stage. I think what I'm going to do is, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10, and I'm going to retroactively bump the Agrabah Stage to a 9 out of 10, I think. Again, the number scores don't actually matter so much here because I'm not planning these all out ahead of time, so the scale's going to be really thrown off. Who cares? Whatever. I'm giving this an 8. We're bumping Agrabah to 9 out of 10 because I really, I can't imagine within the confines of Melody of Memory, I can't imagine a stage being much better than what that Agrabah one pulls off, and this is a close second from what we've seen so far, really. Did I give Mulan an 8? I don't even remember. If I did, maybe Tron is an 8.5. I don't know, whatever, moving on. Speaking of the Twilight Town level, though, we are actually about to get a bit of redemption for KH2 hub city environments. This one has the floating assets and stuff, but it doesn't look like an incomplete mess because it's not floating over a bland, blah, brown texture that looks like it's unfinished. It's floating over more city that is actually fully realized, and more so than that, it's not just buildings floating randomly up in space. They have a block of land underneath them, you see? They actually have, like, it looks like a structure, and there's these sparkles coming off of them, and they're drifting up and down as if by magic. They're using this not as a weird shortcut to make the level function, but to draw attention to interesting landmarks and to make it so that we can't get all the way to the ground level. There are still buildings up right next to you. We got one of the shops here, another shop. We got the McDuck ice cream thing. We're gonna cruise past here in a second. Since this game is steadfastly committed to not letting us actually hang out on ground level, they're finding other ways to get some of those important landmarks that aren't super tall up to us here, at least. It's something that's within Melody, what Melody of Memory is capable of doing, and minimum, if this was a ride, it actually looks like theming as opposed to a weird, incomplete mess. And then out into the next section of Hollow Bastion, which again is actually fully realized instead of being a bunch of random floating assets. We don't get to get that close to it, but the actual skyline of Hollow Bastion in this game is interesting enough because we've got the top of Merlin's building over here. We've got all the weird pipe work that's going on the top of all these roofs. Some of them are complete, some of them aren't. There's actually stuff to see. There's stuff of visual interest. This little transition area off to the left is one of the only bits that feels really incomplete because you can see the stairwell that leads from the entrance to the kind of the entryway down into the actual corridors is just open. There's just open air down here, and you can see other parts of the map. Not good. That's the bit where this map doesn't really hold up so well. But whatever. We push into the tunnels here. I almost feel like we could have gone straight to this and had more time in the tunnels. On into the computer room. Very, very clean transition. That looks natural. That looks like it could be in the game. If I didn't know better, I'd say how that was how it was laid out in the game, you know, other than the scale being a little bit off, the door being way too wide. That feels very, very natural. That transition doesn't. And again, the fact that there's no, like, curve to hide it is a little bit awkward. I mean, we can see over here, there's a room, and then this space doesn't match up. Incongruous space. There's a couple spaces previously in the game where they really would have benefited from doing that type of thing to do transitions between spaces. Like with, like I was talking about previously in Yensid's Tower transitioning into his office. It would have been better if instead of having a weird magic piss light fade, we had, you know, the overall large catacomb of the stairwell, and we could just see his office through here, even if they didn't necessarily match up. Ah, well. So that transition isn't super great, but they're making good use of the outer map here by having us actually... finally, we're almost on ground level, cruising along with all this stuff to the left and right of us, getting actually a little bit, a slightly more intimate feel of the map, right? And then back around to the beginning of it. Not a lot of sense of drama to this one, but I have to bump this a couple of points just because if nothing else, it's a demonstration of exactly how terrible the Twilight Town map is. For sheer competency, and for imaginative application of solving a problem that the Twilight Town map, whoever designed that one, just couldn't be bothered. I guess I'll bump this to like a 6 or 5.5. I don't know. Let's say 5.5. That feels fine. This one is unexciting, but it has a couple of good ideas, and it is perfectly competent. Alrighty, next up, it looks like a repeat, but it's actually not. This time around, though we start down in the city of the world never was, we do progress up into the castle. We don't see a ton of maps in this game that repeat areas in quite this way, but I appreciate the extra build-up that they're adding to us actually getting to the big, you know, the headquarters, the castle, right? We get kind of low to the ground here so that we have the opportunity to pan, you know, back up to actually elevate instead of just going at a straight line up kind of the ramp into this portal here. Again, for a game that often will just put us up at a flat level, I appreciate when it actually does dips like this. They didn't even need to have us go down low. They could have kept us level to the portal and had the bridge underneath us. So at least there was some attempt made here. And of course, there was really no option but to do the portal here. Any of the normal types of transitions this game does would have been super awkward there. Anyway, we let out into this. One of the natural weaknesses of this area, and unfortunately is a weakness of a lot of the ways that just general walls and textures in KH2, is that there's not a lot of interesting stuff to look at sometimes compared to the Tron level from a few minutes ago to, like, you know, to these walls here on this hallway. This is just an incredibly boring hallway, unfortunately. I do like this next bit though. This is some of the best area melding work that they do in the entirety of Melody of Memory right here. We come out into this room and then we curve up over, and then there's a completely new door created here that actually looks fairly natural. It looks like it could be part of the normal, like the official level geometry, and because of that incline that we take, we can't really see through it until we actually get up here. So there are surprises. Sightlines are being controlled. It's very nice. Take a little bit of a curve here into the room with all of the teleporter thingamajiggies. Very nice use of the whole room narrowing towards this one, this one exit point. We get just a little glimpse of Kingdom Hearts out through the window, and then it loops back around into the city. This map, overall, pretty decent. It's not amazing, because it doesn't really have... I don't know, it just, like I said before, it doesn't have a lot of interesting landmarks, but there's some really nice work going on right here with the transition from the Hall of Empty Melodies to, I forget the name of the next room. Let's go with like a 6 out of 10 feels fine, I guess. Now, come on, guys. This is supposed to be a video about Disney rides, not about Legoland rides. There's not really much to say about this one, cause it's just a bunch of blocks. They do have bits where you kind of come in here, and the pillars are tall enough that there are things to be discovered as you're passing through it, but this feels more like... this is like a really, really lame Minecraft map, not an interesting ride. This could have been interesting if they'd done something with, like, the colors changing, like the walls and the blocks shifting in hue as the ride goes on or something like that for certain cues, but they did nothing of the sort. I mean, this is more, I guess I'll grant that this is more visually interesting and does a slightly better job than, like, the Station of Awakening levels. At least there are, like, things to, like, again, there's spots where you're, like, getting closer to stuff and look at it in detail. There are things you can only see once you get closer to them, but it's still really not all that interesting. The only thing really going for it is there's some cool lighting effects. I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 10. Alrighty, Land of Departure. This is a level that contains, a secret, deep disappointment for me. We'll get to that in a second, though. Overall, this level is fairly competent. We have a floating lamp over there for a second, but it has at least it has the little magical sparkle effects on it, and it doesn't feel obtrusive or unfinished like the Halloweentown and Twilight Town. Is it weird that Halloweentown and Twilight Town, they're so, like, they both have such similar problems, and they happen to be those two levels with those names? I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I like that they bothered to have the weird training wheel thing spinning around and stuff, so there's something active going on the map. And at minimum, this is a decent loop. This is a decent little trip of kind of taking us around Land of Departure. Everything blends together very, very smoothly. We get a very nice lay of the land, and unlike something like Destiny Islands, there are enough kind of spots where our sightlines are limited. The opposite cliff face, we have this kind of starting area. We have up to the outer courtyard, and then inside the actual building, right? Like, this does feel like, and it moves along at a decent clip. This one is very similar to the Destiny Islands level / ride, but a lot better in terms of its execution. A lot better in terms of, taking you through an experience and seeing different interesting things along the way. When we push on through into here, we take a relatively decent, clever transition. They have us go through the front door, and then we're just straight up on the top floor already, so we can be in the actual kind of upper throne room, which is the memorable part of the area, the part you actually got to play in Birth by Sleep, obviously, so that makes sense. We're not going to do my whole Kingdom Hearts 3 playthrough, Insano World, brain problems, breakdown of the layout of this place again, but my disappointment actually comes right here. Watch the track. Look at this. We are pulling a straight-up U-turn. This is one of the tightest turns that any track in this game takes. We went into a small enclosed area and took a very harsh turn to get ourselves back out of it smoothly, and we even maintained a decent speed throughout the entire process. There are so many levels in this game that would benefit from harsher turns and going around corners and stuff a bit more tightly, but it's all these really gradual, sleepy, boring turns around the maps that are so... Some of them are like at a constant, slow, gradual left turn. Forget NASCAR, they're going to turn left, they're going to turn left again. On some of these maps, they never stop turning left. It's just this constant, gradual slope to everything. It's so boring. But this right here proves that the game design did at least allow for it. You say, Jacob, it would be harder to do the rhythm stuff on the turn. Yeah, more interesting, exciting gameplay. You gotta base it upon your knowledge of where they are along the, I don't know the technical terminology for like sheet music or whatever. The little lines, right? You have to look at where they are on the lines and track their upcoming positions. It becomes a whole new dimension of challenge, you guys. There's nothing that bad about this one. It's not very exciting, but it's fairly well put together. Yeah, I think 5. 5's probably fine. We're going to say 5 out of 5. I would give it a bonus point for having day and night variations, but unlike the Destiny Islands level, this doesn't really contribute to like a storytelling shift or whatever. So in fact, I'm just going to say that having the day and nighttime variations solidifies this as a 5 out of 5. I don't remember how I ranked Destiny Islands now. Did I give Destiny Islands a 4? Because if I gave Destiny Islands a 4, maybe this needs to be a 6 or a 5.5. I don't know. Again, the number scores don't matter. Let's move on. All right, this one overall, very solid. Good transitions, good map layout, good storytelling. We start out in the caves here. There's a lot of already pre-made, little amusements and things to look at going around on the tracks down there. There's a lot of these little sparkly diamonds and stuff on the walls all around us. Relatively claustrophobic space. We do some tight turns to weave our way through it. We let back out here into a very, very clean, natural-feeling transition, cruising past the dwarves' house. But we don't hang out too long there. We move on at a pretty decent pace up over this hill into the little glen. Then, very smoothly, very nice, we go straight over the wall and into the castle courtyard. There's no need for an awkward, weird transition here where you can tell the level's layout doesn't quite match up together. This looks extremely natural, very well done. The version of this, that's a Disney ride that's on ground level and pulls up to that gate and the gate swings open and we're inside the castle courtyard. Immaculate, right? But then, of course, we push through the castle courtyard and we descend down into the dungeons. Through that narrow thing opens up into a slightly larger room, but a very, very tight turn again through a narrow corridor out into another larger space. We kind of go over and through all this stuff. I imagine animatronics, things popping out at us with some spooks happen throughout here. This would be kind of a spookier ride, I imagine. Speaking of spookiness, we push on into the Queen's little room here where the magic mirror is, and they even bothered, check this out, to have the magic mirror animating. It's got all kinds of spooky stuff going on inside of it. You pull up to that and it goes rah at your ride, makes some kind of spookiness, and then the ride vehicle spins and drives away out back, and then woohoo, whatever. We're back here at the beginning of the ride, and that's fine. Presumably, we'd have a little finishing sequence of yay, everything's fine, and then the ride's over or whatever, right? This is like a 6.5 out of 10, I think. It's not amazing, not super duper exciting, but honestly, this is the best that they probably could have done with the map layout that they have, and this would be a totally acceptable Snow White kind of ride, taking you through the sequences and sights and sounds of the movie, right? Hits all the major beats, everything connects together pretty well. I don't really want to give it a 7 because it's not super duper exciting. I'm going to say 6.5. Castle of Dreams is an interesting one. It makes some interesting choices here. So we start out inside of Cinderella's house, right? Going through one of the rooms, and then we come up here with what looks like it's kind of an unnatural, weird transition through this door, but they bothered, check this out, to have the doors open. They actually bothered to they don't do this for a lot of the transitions. They bothered to make these big door panels here that are open up as if we are actually walking into obviously in the movie, Cinderella's room is at the top of a big tower, but here, whatever, she's actually living inside of a little walk-in closet that's tucked away to the side of this room, right? That works just fine. So that opens up, we let ourselves into this room. Here we are in Cinderella's room. We see her dress getting ready. Then we get spat into the outside. This works pretty well from a storytelling sequence as well. Let's say we start out inside the house. She gets her dress. It gets torn up. Then we're outside of the house. Oh no, what am I going to do? The fairy godmother shows up. We have a little bit of a set piece sequence here in the woods where dress magically appears on her through the magic of projection mapping. The carriage appears, she gets into it, she cruises off through the woods, right? Little transition sequence through the woods, and then in an inspired choice to make sure, because it is a problem that we just hang out here in the woods for a minute, it's not really that much interesting to see. I gotta fill it in with my imagination of what will be happening in the show version of the ride, right? However, decent choice here to speed things up. They dump us. They kind of go over the trees and then come into the main courtyard from the side. We don't come in through the main door like you might expect. This is good because, once again, we don't get the entire lay of the land. We have kind of a curve over into it. So let's say we're coming in from the side. We see Cinderella pulling in the coach down here, right? And we take kind of a sharper turn towards, and now we get to take in the whole courtyard. She comes over here as well. We get to head towards the main entryway, this is a pretty long line here, but you really don't want to mess this up. This kind of has to be a long, straight sequence leading up to that main grand staircase. So they do need to hide this for as long as they can for it to have a sense of reveal and scale. If we came in straight from the front gate here, we would see the grand staircase for the entire time that we were in that main courtyard. But here, we're only starting to get a whiff of the staircase right here. We pass in through the main doors. We get a nice sense of movement as we whip past all of these columns and the candelabras over into the grand staircase, which we sweep up all the way up to the top. And then you're going, this is doing pretty well for itself. This is a good job. They're doing a good job on this ride. And then it ends. It dumps us right back into Cinderella's room. Here we get this little transition space here, which they've looks like just taking some random assets from Birth by Sleep and kind of slapped them together to make this transition room, which, whatever, I guess I can't really blame them. They did what they could with the assets that they had. But we don't dump into the ballroom, man. Come on, it should conclude in the ballroom. We can we can go kind of around it maybe, and then up above to the balcony that, you walk through as Terra in Birth by Sleep, and then that's the transition back to Cinderella's room. Come on, man. You need the ballroom for the dance to happen at the end. This blows it on a storytelling front right at the very end there. Competent, some good stuff going on, but kind of blows it at the end. I'm going to give this another 5.5, maybe a 4.5, because it really did kind of blow it at the very ending there. Maybe a 4, I don't know. Again, the number scores don't matter, and I can't keep track of what I'm giving to anything at this point. Enchanted Dominion here has the honor of being one of the, I don't know, I guess I shouldn't say most thoroughly realized, but most comprehensive world tours within this game. We lead up into the main Sleeping Beauty castle. It dumps us into the main courtyard, which we come through kind of at a side angle, which is a bit of a weird choice. Okay, you wanted us to kind of see the room, but didn't want to spend too much time there. And then a weird scale transition, where we have a chair fit for a human down here, still visible, and we push into this room with a chair for a mountain troll. I like that with this transition where we kind of go out the window here. This is all right, I guess, and then we get a trip through the woods out here once we get into kind of the narrower section of the valley, where we got the mountains kind of pushing in, the cliff faces pushing in on either side. This is all right. This is nice. However, this whole trip through the woods goes on a little bit too long. I mean, there isn't exactly much to see out here in the woods. It's kind of the same thing over and over again. And then we don't even stay low to the ground through these cliffs. We stay above them here, where we could have wound through them and let out into this, area with the pond, had kind of a reveal on that. We don't get to do that very well. Then we push up here through a portal transition instead of I don't know how they would have done this differently since the whole skybox changes, but I'm still disappointed by it because, again, we don't start down below. Why don't we start down low and ascend up along the big cliff face, right? We could have removed some of the woods back there and have us twist and turn along with the cliff face that's taking us up to Maleficent's castle. Anyway, we head through the front gate of that into some of the exterior areas, and then it dumps us straight into Maleficent's kind of her own little throne room area. This one is not bad. No, it is kind of bad. We don't really get to explore Maleficent's castle, which feels like it should be, the climax. It feels like we should see a decent amount of her castle, right? Like, that should be, that's the spooky, scary climax ending. We should spend a few minutes here. There should be a more dramatic sense of build going up towards it instead of already being level with the drawbridge in the distance there. There is a sense of progression through this one that's nice, but I feel like it needed to get more use out of Maleficent's castle and less out of the woods and rocks. We spent too much time here. I don't know. This one, I'm gonna give this one a 4. All right, we've had 2 Radiant Garden / Hollow Bastion tracks so far. One of them was good, one of them was not so good. Can this one find redemption for the initial Hollow Bastion track? Right out the gate, it benefits from, look at that Technicolor vision that's exploding right when we start out the map, right? We come through that initial gate into the central courtyard. We have very bright colored roofs. We have, the flower beds down underneath us. It's very visually compelling right out of the gate. Looks very nice. A nice trip kind of up here through these central gardens to this main stairwell. Weird thing is, you feel like, okay, well, the stairwell is going left. I want to follow the staircase. I want to go with that. And instead we go into this big, huge aerial shot, which again, you guys know how I feel about this stuff. Number 1, be pretty much impossible to replicate in a Disney ride. Number 2, even if you could, wouldn't be all that interesting. There's not a lot to see. I do like once we get closer to here, though, we get to pass between the weird architecture that's coming off of the castle. We fly over the fountains, but we don't get close to them. I wish we were down alongside the fountains, weaving right next to them, getting a good close look at the waterfalls, maybe getting a little bit of spray splashed on us as the ride vehicle passes by, right? Then we are so high over this whole industrial zone, we don't get a very good look at any of it. We don't get to weave down through it very nicely. I don't know. I feel like there's a missed opportunity here for going through, kind of a variation on the tunnels, that transition you from the fountains to the industrial zone. And then again, we're out here over a big expanse of nothing. It just, doesn't look so nice here. I do like the transition through the gate up here, though. I like that initial opening area. I like kind of traveling up through the gardens a second ago. This one is mixed bag. It just wouldn't be a very exciting, cool ride to be on. I'm gonna give this one a 4.5. Because at least like one room, I don't know, one neat room, one or two neat rooms does not a huge difference make. I'm gonna give this a 4. This is a 4. There is a variation on this version of the Radiant Garden map for the boss fight against Terra Xehanort. All it really does is when you're in this central area, there's the big evil plumes of purple fart gas. And then when you move out of that area, the rest of the map is nighttime or evening, I guess. This doesn't really do anything for me from a ride standpoint. As a Kingdom Hearts nerd, it's kind of cool to see the rest of Birth by Sleep Radiant Garden with nighttime and stormy clouds and stuff like that. So as a Kingdom Hearts nerd, this is kind of cute and fun. From a ride standpoint, this does absolutely nothing for me, so the score remains unchanged from a moment ago. Speaking of Technicolor Wonderlands, Disney Castle here, Disney Town, is not exactly lacking for popping colors all over the place, but unfortunately, look at how sparsely populated the whole thing is. Look at the weird placement of the little ice cream gun. It looks so small. We're not off to a good start on this one, are we? I like that they took some liberties here with the fruit ball sequence or whatever. They have the goalpost animating. They have the balls kind of bouncing around in the air. I imagine this being a sequence in the ride where the balls are actually getting, kind of batted around above you, and you're driving through a game or whatever, and all the characters are like, oh no, what's that vehicle doing on the court? Get out of here, we're trying to play. Maybe some fruit balls almost hit the vehicle or whatever. That would be kind of a cute sequence. I like that they did that back there, but again, we're up too high to really get a good look at the town until right here. A frankly inspired choice. They didn't have to do this. They decided to include some of the minigame stuff, and we pull onto the Rumble Racing track. You're in Disney Town, right? You've just showed up, and it's like you're here for a big race, right? And the initial sequence, the initial little bit of it, is you going through town to try and arrive at the, oh no, the race is about to start, we're gonna be late. We rush through town, we drive through the little fruit ball thing, we weave through the streets, and then we get here just in time to get to the finish line. Boop, 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 and we take off, or maybe we're late and we have to go catch up with Pete, right? Something like that. We go through the tunnel here, and then it spits us back out into the main courtyard where we started. I like the idea of that. I almost wish they had taken a bunch of the racing maps from Birth by Sleep, like the ones that take you through different parts of town, the ones that take you through Disney Castle, and they built the entire thing around that instead. But, at least it's an inspired idea that they did that at all. They didn't have to do that one bit. They took it, and they matched up very nicely, the starting line with the entryway to the racing. Inspired choice. This, along with the fruit ball sequence, I'm gonna give this a 6 out of 10. The actual the normal like Disney Town parts of it are a little sparsely populated, not so great. But this is a fun romp. This is fine. I can imagine what we have here being the basis for a pretty fun ride and then evolving into something else. So this gets a 6 out of 10. Uh-oh, here we have a map that really, really suffers from Kingdom Hearts 2 blank wall syndrome. There's not very much of interest to actually see in the levels of deep space, unfortunately. You don't have, that Tron effect where there's just tons of cool lights and textures on everything and a lot of interesting colors, because most rooms, like this one right here, look at beige room of emptiness and mystery. Wow, what an exciting setting for a ride. This one is also shockingly dependent upon the inky black void transitions. It's just a bunch of hallways. They don't have to worry about messing with the skybox. You'd think they would have blended these together a little bit more, but whatever. Anyways, we dump into another hallway. Not much going on here. Oh, look, a hallway with a slightly different color palette. Wow, I'm enthralled. Passing through this room with stuff floating around, I would say those could be neat effects, but I've seen plenty of rides where things are floating around in the air around me to simulate, zero G's or whatever. The Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters or whatever it's called ride is pretty old now. There's tons of stuff floating around on that one. This stuff is not very impressive anymore. We're pulling through big empty rooms where there's not much visually going on. The only saving grace of this ride is the reactor room. Look at that, all those shiny lights all over the place. It looks like the Duel of the Fates from the Phantom Menace. No, don't leave this room. Go back into this room. Do a loop-de-loop around this room. This room is interesting. Oh, and it's gone already. The only interesting part of the ride gone like that because we had to get back to another blank, boring, empty teal room or aquamarine room or whatever color this is. 3 out of 10. Back to Neverland yet again, boys, and I don't know if it's some kind of curse related to this one to Peter Pan having one of the more iconic dark rides at actual Disney theme parks, but yet again, we do not fare super well with Neverland here. Right out of the gate, we got big floating sections of the island that don't even connect together. We don't have a skybox excuse on this one. We're messing with scale in weird ways here. It's all just like there's a big chunk of the island floating, and we're pulling over this lagoon here. Captain Hook's pirate ship is out in the distance, but we can't see it. It's out and hidden. Why are these sections of the island floating? Why aren't they just part of the island? And again, it's so open. We get such an easy impression of this thing the whole way through. It would have been easy to just like keep, we could have, mirrored some aspects of the map and had like the open ocean to the left or right of us throughout the entire ride and weaved along through different sections of the island. But instead, we have these they look unfinished parts of the island just floating over here. And then look, there's a black void portal on this map of all places. Why do we need a black void portal on this map when we're being when everything is already this open and this spaced out? It was just to take us back around to here. If that had been a transition inside of Skull Rock or something, I would have understood it, but why couldn't we just loop back to that naturally? This one is I don't know if this is worse than the Captain Hook's pirate ship as a ride, but I think it might be worse than the Days one. Ugh. I mean, there's nothing interesting. There's basically nothing interesting to see on this. It's ugly. It's not as unfinished as, like I said before, Halloweentown and Twilight Town, but this is ill-advised all around. This had the best potential of any of the Neverlands featured in Kingdom Hearts to be an interesting ride, and totally blew it. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 10, maybe a 2 out of 10. This is not good. All right, the Keyblade Graveyard here, predictably, it suffers from the areas being very, very open with not a lot of interest to look at. We kind of come in here at the beginning of the ride. We go into this canyon here where there are the tornadoes, but we spend a little bit too much time here because the space is, it's a huge space. I don't blame them. It is what the level is. But again, we're not ranking the levels. We're ranking how well these would work as Disney rides. And it's just too much open space. The tornadoes, you think they could have put the tornadoes right next to the ride, right? Have the tornadoes pull up right next to us. Oh, it's going to come get us. Oh, and then it goes away. Nothing. Nuts. We take a turn around here. Ominous glowing purple light. That's not bad. I like that. Builds a feeling of dread. But then there's nothing even purple around here. It doesn't even, they didn't even put a roof over us like there actually is on the build up to the entrance to the Keyblade Graveyard. They could have made this much narrower to really simulate that feeling and then open up into the vast expanse of the Keyblades scattered all over the ground. Whatever. Though, they did what they could with the map that existed, obviously. It looks like they've even added a lot more Keyblades than were originally rendered in the PSP version of the game. And I see no choice but to have a black inky void transition here. It's not like they could have the entire, Birth by Sleep secret movie sequence play out and before our eyeballs. Then we ascend up here, the god rays from Kingdom Hearts coming down. We go over the upper mesa where the boss fight happens, and then through another black portal. This one, at least borderline, the sequencing is here, but I can't really give them praise for that because this is such a straight shot level with obvious storytelling that if they had done this any other way, it would have been a complete no-brainer. And unfortunately, there's not much of interest to see. This would not be a very exciting ride. Nobody wants to get on a ride and just go through weird desert setting unless it's a roller coaster and the desert is just a backdrop like a Big Thunder Mountain Railroad or whatever. This is not a good setting for a dark ride. I'm borderline 2 out of 10 on this one. This would just be so boring. 2 out of 10. And now we move on to the Dream Drop Distance maps. A big consistent problem with all of these from the perspective of what we're talking about today is that the maps in Dream Drop are all so broad and open, so they don't lend themselves to a lot of the stuff that we're actually reviewing these levels on. One advantage that the Traverstown Stage at least has is that there is a lot of stuff to look at. Some of the rooms suffer from bland wall syndrome, like what we're seeing right here, but a lot of the places we weave through on this map actually have interesting things to look at. Would have been a lot better if we could have been ground level, weaving through these streets, pulling past that shop there, going underneath the glowing lights and over towards the Colosseum. As it stands, it's a little bit of a disappointment. All that stuff is over there in the distance, the Colosseum stuff. We don't really get a good look at it. But, you know, whatever. You get a glimpse at it for a moment, and it's one of the, you know, set dressings that you get to see. Whatever, that's fine, I guess. One area where I gotta give this level props, though, they finally did it. They really committed. Have there been any maps that have actually done this so far? Maybe one or two. I can't remember them if they were. Look, the gate actually opened. We're driving towards a door that's closed, and it swings open automatically to admit us. A staple of these types of rides, and it was actually executed in-game! Again, the specific areas that they've selected from Dream Drop Distance Traverstown benefit from just, there is so much visually going on. There's a lot to see on this ride, right? There's not really much of an adventure to be had here, because there's not really much sense of progression, regardless of how you arrange the levels of Traverstown in Dream Drop, because look, this beautiful garden area is the final boss area. This is the conclusion. It doesn't feel like we've gone anywhere. There's no sense of progression or storytelling. But they've done a good job of taking the space and leading us through it and having some interesting stuff along the way. We go into this room here again. It's too big. You know, there's not much we can get nice up close and personal looks at. That's a big problem that we're going to see with most of these Dream Drop Distance maps going forward. I like that transition into the interior garden area, though. That was cute. This one benefits from the bright colors and the twinkling electric lights, and I'm going to give it a bonus point, or maybe, I'm going to say I'll give it a half a bonus point for the opening gate there. But just overall, this ride would be pretty boring to be on. Would not be a very good ride. It would feel like a freaking Small World After All or something. It's like it's just there for the gimmick of a ride to be on. It's just bright and colorful. It's not very exciting. There's no sense of adventure or progression. It's just like, oh wow, look at the pretty lights and the environment and the things moving around and whatever. So I don't know. I'm gonna give this like a 3.5 or a 4 or something. Not very good. But like I said, it gets that bonus point or bonus half point. Hunchback of Notre Dame here does a remarkable job of blending together the various maps of the original Dream Drop Distance layout. We push in through the front gates of Notre Dame, right? We go through here and we sweep up, through an opening up here at the top into the actual room where all the bells are housed, right? Swing around through all of the scaffolding and structure here, past the bells, we get a really good look, check that out. One of the only little bits of, kind of fine detail work in the maps of Dream Drop Distance. We don't see that much. We don't see that type of stuff very much after Kingdom Hearts 1. We sweep through Quasi's little room, we see his little setup, his miniatures, and out the window, we leap out like he would. Unfortunately, it's not over the city, it's over the water, which isn't quite right. It doesn't feel quite with the movie, but whatever, that's fine. We go along the bridge here. There's some weird floating stuff off to the side, but they made decent looking platforms for it, so I'm not gonna knock it. They blend together the streets pretty well, but again, it's so broad. It's such a huge map. As I said, this is kind of the expected Dream Drop Distance problem. The maps are too big, and there's not a lot of interest to see, so once we're actually in the city, there is very, very little of interest going on. This map does have a Paris is burning, Paris is on fire variation. We actually go up high this time. We go up to the top of Notre Dame. We curve back around here. This is very nice. I like taking this kind of trip upstairs. There are obviously the day and night variations and a couple of other things in this, but this is one of the more complex variations we actually get to see. Basically completely changes up the track while we are at Notre Dame itself. And the city being on fire is just as pathetic as it was in actual Dream Drop Distance. So I would say that the actual stuff they're doing with Notre Dame itself in this map is fun, but the stuff they're doing with Paris is lazy and boring and not that interesting. I almost want to give it a 5 out of 5 just because I really respect what's going on over at Notre Dame and with the variation taking us up to the roof. If the ride was just Notre Dame, if they found some weird way to like swing us around back outside and it was on fire and take us up to the roof, I'd say that was like a job well done. But as it stands, we got a really, really long section of the ride that's just super boring and nothing interesting going on. I'm tempted to award it an honorary 5 out of 5 just because one bit's pretty good, but that's not how it works. If most of the ride is boring, then most of the ride is boring. I'm gonna give this one a 4. The grid is somewhat predictably nowhere near as good as Space Paranoids. This is both the Dream Drop Distance problem of the maps are just too big and don't have a lot of detail, so there's not much of interest to see. And then, of course, we also have just the color palette of Tron Legacy. Now, I really like Tron Legacy, Don't let anybody make you think that I don't like Tron Legacy, because it ain't true. I like this movie. But it does not lend itself super duper well to the advantage that Space Paranoids had, which was just the sheer variety of lights and colors and things that we were seeing along the way. It's made even worse with the Dream Drop Distance's selections of areas, because it is just very, very homogenized and flat, and there's not a lot of color being thrown into. There's not a lot of stuff that pops out and stands out, right? We do get, at the very end here, the inside of the recompiler or whatever it's called, the main big evil base that Clue has, where he's abducting programs and stuff. But we get such a brief look at it, and it's only down below. All the actual like red standout bits are all down below us and above us. So it's just not a lot of good work being done here. The main advantage of this is that there is some storytelling work being done. If we consider it to start right here. We start out in the Disc War arena. This looks pretty good. They've done this. This looks decent for this ride, and it stands out separate, kind of with a slightly different aesthetic, because we got all the glass paneling around us. Then we get dumped out into the light cycle track. Taking kind of a similar cue to what the Disney Town world did for Birth by Sleep, right? Again, we don't get to hang out here super duper long, though. Just a bit unfortunate. At least they was there at all. Hey, you know what? I didn't expect them to do this or to include the racetrack in Disney Town, so I guess they got that going for them. But overall, this one, very, very I shouldn't say disappointing, because I expected it to not be good, because there's just not much you can do with the map of the grid as presented in Dream Drop Distance. There's really nothing to this one. I almost want to give it a spite, too, just because I'm disappointed that this series kind of wasted Tron after Kingdom Hearts 2, but it probably doesn't deserve a 2. Nah, it deserves a 2. This is a 2 out of 10. Prankster's Paradise, if nothing else, has an advantage over the previous Pinocchio level, because you're actually going somewhere instead of moving through homogenized Monstro guts, right? We get to see the Pleasure Island grounds here. This would be a great setting for a dark ride, cruising through Pleasure Island, getting to see all of the various buildings and pavilions and rides and stuff scattered around you. Obviously, a lot of that stuff is not represented here, but I'm willing to throw this a kind of a charity point, if you will. For I would imagine that there would be, other stuff kind of around in the outer area of Pleasure Island. Then we take a sharp turn inside of the Big Top, and this is an area where we finally get some of the slightly narrower hallways and a ceiling. Thank goodness we so rarely have ceilings in this game. We get a really nice sense of progression here. I mean, granted, it was already built like this. It was already built like a curving roller coaster ride in the original game, but they actually used it instead of straightening it out for some godforsaken reason or whatever, right? This works pretty decently. I almost wish they had removed the central room here, because it doesn't really do anything for the ride, but I guess you do want a little bit of aesthetic variety. You want that, you want that kind of thematic break up for a second before you go back into the tunnels again. I like that they maintain that the clown is looking at you, that the clown's eyes follow you as you're going through the tunnel. They didn't need to do that. They bothered to maintain that part of the level and have the eyes can kind of follow you as you move along the track. I appreciate that. Unnecessary flourish, but they did it anyway. I really, really wish that I could say, and now let's go take a look at the companion levels. The inside of Monstro for Riku's side, the underwater stuff for Sora, but it ain't here. They only did the one. We didn't get like a different variant for this one, which is fine, I suppose, because those would have been pretty extreme variants to do instead of just like a nighttime or a daytime or a minor mix-up. But if they had thrown in the underwater sequence from Sora's side, especially, we already had one monster level, obviously, so it might have been redundant to do another one, but if we'd thrown in the underwater sequence, this would have been really, really cool. I would have been totally willing to merge them into one level and really give it a big point boost. As it stands, I don't want to give it too many bonus points just for using the inside of the circus when that was like the obvious choice, but they did it. They used it, and it works pretty well for what's going on here. I think that a dark ride through Pleasure Island would be a really cool, fun setting for that sort of thing. So, even though it would have been nice to have the underwater sequence, I'm going to say this is a 6 out of 10. I wish I had nicer things to say about Country of Musketeers, since it features some of the best music in Dream Drop Distance, but unfortunately, not so much. Again, this suffers from the general broad Dream Drop Distance problem of the maps are just too big. In fact, I kind of thought there was some hope for this one, because this one has something that is pretty rare in Dream Drop Distance: interiors and narrow corridors. I thought if they set this inside of the Opera House, we could have some good stuff here. But alas, they did not. Instead, we have a pretty long, boring exterior sequence of sweeping over these completely unmemorable woods. The main benefit here is that they did not have us go through a black portal and warp over to that other, like, city offshore. Instead, they used this as a fairly clean transition, curving around over the beach, and hey, towards the Opera House. Very nice, right? We go in through the front gates, and then up through the front door, as you would expect, but, you know, this unlike with the, what I was talking about previously with the Cinderella one where we came in through the side, and I thought that worked pretty well. There's more detail in the exterior here with the gardens and stuff, and the gate and the door is not this huge, tall thing where you can see inside forever. It's very small. So in this case, coming through the front gate and building up towards it, and then going down so we can't really see inside, and then coming back up to reveal the rest of the room, this works quite well. There's enough going on in the interior here that moving through it does feel very, very fun. Then we get dumped into the actual Opera House room, which is mostly this giant black void out in front of us. I mean, I could imagine some kind of animatronic show or animation show happening up here, but we're just dumped into the big storage room. We don't actually have, again, if this would have, I feel like this is a real missed opportunity to have some cool, tight interiors. Like we did a second ago on Prankster's Paradise, but alas, no dice. And then we have a, admittedly, actually not even that bad, all things considered, transition from the interior back out into the kind of the Musketeers barracks courtyard or whatever. This one, I appreciate building up to and entering the Opera House, but the rest of it, pretty dull. Feels like a really big missed opportunity. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10. We skip over Fantasia World to get straight to The World That Never Was, which you might think is a weird choice in a music game, but again, the maps are so open in Dream Drop Distance that I don't think we would have gotten anything out of it anyway, other than just, oh, it would have been nice to have the classical music in there, but the levels would have been too long, so, you know, whatever. People wouldn't have liked it, probably. So we're just going to move on. Unfortunately, this level does not have the advantages of the original World That Never Was. Way too open, we're way too up high and removed from all the details. I like that they've bothered to throw in some additional little things like we saw a second ago there. This building kind of flips, and these buildings kind of flip upright. And a second ago, a skyscraper exploded as if it was cut up. Just a second here, it's coming up. Kaboom! That's nice. That'd be kind of a cool effect to see. But we're not really making good use of what does exist of this level here. We go through a black void, get dumped into Riku's half of the level, where again, it's just too open, and with not enough detail to really give us anything interesting to look at. Just a lot of flying high over generic blank level geometry. There is almost nothing of interest to see in this level. I appreciate the set dressing of having the building get cut up and other stuff kind of moving around in the background, but that is the only thing going for this level. This would be super duper boring. I'm gonna give this a 2 out of 10, man. Somewhat bizarrely, the fight with young Master Xehanort is an actual level instead of one of the little boss fight things. They bothered to make a stage where we zip around through his weird timescape. That's a choice. I mean, I guess to be fair, there is like stuff up above to kind of weave through and see, but once again, we can turn our head and take in the entire ride experience in a matter of seconds. There's not even stuff like, there's not stuff of enough definition that getting close to it even lends us a greater perspective, like with the stained glass windows or whatever in the Station of Awakening. This is like, you look, okay, I got the whole thing, I got the lay of the land. Instantaneously, I get nothing from weaving throughout all of this. I hesitate because sure, the setting is kind of cool or whatever, but again, we're ranking this on its quality as a ride. This is a 1 out of 10. Next up, we have an inky gray void that occasionally shifts and becomes a white void with black ripples and stuff on the ground. Oh look, it looks like a big old cake down there. 1 out of 10. Now, unfortunately, we are almost at the end of the whole experience here because they did not pull very many levels from Kingdom Hearts 0.2 and Kingdom Hearts 3. For those who don't know, Melody of Memory was actually developed with Unity, and I assume they got handed a lot of the PS2 assets that they then got to tool around with, but the team did not give them any of the Unreal 4 assets to actually work with for the level here. When I look around at this space, I could be wrong. Perhaps I'm mistaken. I haven't read any interviews that confirm anything like this or whatever, but this looks like this may be made custom using elements from Kingdom Hearts 1. You're using like sand textures and rocks and stuff from Destiny Islands Falling Apart. You're using the weird purple splintery stuff that appears when you're on the end of the world, at the very end of the game, at the ruins of Destiny Islands. This, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is just remixed assets from Kingdom Hearts 1 slapped together to look like the area from 0.2. That's not a problem, necessarily. It's just an observation of why most of the Kingdom Hearts 3 levels in this game are just you running against FMVs. They're not actually levels. On that note, this level has a very similar problem to ones we were just seeing a second ago, which is I turned my head around, I've taken in the entire ride at a moment's notice. I wish that I could award this map bonus points. I wish that there was a, like, you know, daytime before, or like the earlier phase of the fight version of this, right? Or even rather that, like, you know, maybe the map shifts as you go through it, right? It goes from the, you know, the kind of blue skies setting over to this. That would be an interesting transition. As it stands, this is a lot more visually interesting than the destroyed Destiny Islands from the beginning of the game was as a singular level, and I respect the developers of Melody of Memory for seemingly taking old assets and remixing them into this new level. I think that's pretty neat, but I'm sorry. I think this is like a 2 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10. I'll throw out the bonus point for work involved, but as a Disney ride, as a theme park ride in general, not very good. This gets a 3 out of 10. Oh, wow, look at me. I'm watching a cutscene. I'm sitting in a ride vehicle that's maybe, like, jostling to the left and right and stuff and has a video screen, but it's actually not going anywhere. It's not a real ride. Man, if only the movie in front of me was at least interesting, then maybe this would be a fun ride, but as it stands, it's just a weird edited music video of a bunch of stuff that I've seen before, and it's not very interesting, visually stimulating. And this is, like, the least interesting actual rhythm gaming in the game. DMCA! DMCA! Look at us, we had the audacity to include the freaking world logo as part of the cutscene that you're rhythming over. Well, boys, here we go. The final level. And boy, is it embarrassing. This is where you can really tell that they took PS2 assets and slapped them together to try and make something that vaguely resembled the level from Kingdom Hearts 3. Look at the keyblades and the textures of the rocks that they are stabbed into. This looks so cheap. And I mean, I guess I shouldn't necessarily expect anything. Like, what else could they have done other than maybe not do this part of the game? But I guess they knew they couldn't have an FMV for the final stuff. They had to have a level. But we don't even get to go inside of the labyrinth. We're just out here. We go through a really embarrassingly wide cavern because they didn't want us to get close to those PSP keyblades and really rough, ugly, muddy textures. And then we pull out here into the open and we just do a big loop around a vast, empty desert. Wow, 1 out of 10. What a conclusion. And no, before any of you try to get smart with me, this is not a level. Fine, sure, whatever. You want me to review this? Wow, 0 out of 10. It's literally nothing. What an amazing ride. I can't wait to get off of it, walk outside, and look up at the Florida sky and see the exact same thing, but real! Yep, you know what? I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna keep Agrabah's score at a 9 out of 10, because I do think that this whole initial sequence where you're pushing through Agrabah is like, you can kind of see what's coming up ahead of you. There's not a lot to see, but then again, there's enough detail off to the side. Let's imagine the ride vehicle stopping at each of these junctions, or slowing down enough that there's some kind of animatronic action and storytelling happening on the left and right, and the initial part right here is the queue. It's where you get on the ride vehicle. You know, I think that this gets an honorary 10 out of 10. This is the official GOAT of the day. This was the best one by a pretty decent margin other than the Tron one. They did a fantastic job on this. This is the winner, and I believe that's all that there is to say on Melody of Memory, because I sure don't have anything else to talk about with this game of anything of interest. And no, I'm not being sarcastic or passive-aggressive or like, aha, you know, oh, I'm teasing that I'm going to do something else. I have absolutely nothing else to say. This is easily the most interesting discussion topic for me regarding this game. If you do desperately want to watch me talk about more traditional Kingdom Hearts, you know, conversation subjects for an extremely lengthy period of time for whatever reason, well, we have a playthrough series covering the entire franchise that if you're watching this video, you probably know about by now. A couple of the games are here on this channel where you're watching this. The rest of them are over on our second channel, Research Runs. Didn't do a playthrough of this game. Also did not do playthroughs of Days and Coded, you know, because of the technical difficulties. We did watch the movies or whatever. But yeah, we wrapped that whole shindig up a while ago. And if you're already familiar with all that crap, I also did a really obnoxiously long, messy, unscripted disaster of a video that's like 3 hours long, where I just talked about storytelling in the Kingdom Hearts series. That's also over on our second channel, Research Runs. I don't necessarily recommend that you watch that if you're not familiar with my other discussions on the series, because it's pretty intense. This dip down through the hole, and then the escape sequence afterwards, just, so inspired. Whoever designed this one, bravo, good sir or ma'am. Gold star to you, the MVP of Melody of Memory. Doing a real good job out here, much better than Kairi. These guys are so bad at choreographing fights that in the same fight, to show that Kairi doesn't know how to fight twice, they just have Xehanort catch her Keyblade. They do the same thing twice. Oh, look, I escaped from your grapple, and I'm gonna swing the Keyblade around, and I'm gonna jump around, and then we're both gonna jump around like Advent should, and I'm just gonna catch the Keyblade again. You guys suck. You're so bad at making fight scenes. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, fighting an unimportant jobber on a motorcycle is more exciting than any of the fights with the universe-ending titans in Kingdom Hearts 3. What's wrong with you?